a program of some reasonable length to begin, and we'd like you all to be comfortable and enjoy particularly the observations of some good friends of all of yours as well. What a difference one man can make.
Thank you very much.
Almost going to be my age in about 20 years.
And what a difference he has left as an imprint in this entire community, not just along the green campus of McGeorge, but throughout all of these parts of Northern California.
Fine. Good to see you. Thank you.
Quiet man, simple man, man who had said just a few months ago, well, 65's coming up, let's just have a little small party, you know? And then some of his friends got together, and look what happened, Gordon. We got you again.
Yeah.
Excuse me a minute. Just looking to see if there are any open microphones around.
There is one.
Or used refrigerators. Watch out, there comes another one. There is hardly a facet of the law that Gordon has not either created or participated in. He even married Creighton Sanders once. A memory he has probably long since purposely forgotten.
It was on the lure lead.
It would be outrageously presumptuous for one person to offer a presumption on the part of 1,000. But I feel remarkably safe in suggesting that there isn't a person in this room who feels that they have been able to give, even in a small way, what they have gotten in such great magnitudes from their friend or their advisor or their teacher, whatever the relationship might have been, Gordon Schaber.
Thank you.
We are here not just because you're old. Oh, that feels so good to know somebody's older than me. We are here because we love you, because you have had a profound effect on each and every one of you, of us. You have always pushed the envelope in terms of the search for what could better the field of law education. But mostly along the way, you've given us your friendship, your counsel, your wit, that incredible intellect. And that part of our lives, whoever we are, is the richer for that friendship. It is something that is instant with Gordon Schaber. It's funny, Carol and I interviewed Gordon live at 6:30, and Carol had not met Gordon. We'd been talking about him this evening, and she turned to me after the interview and she said, "Wow, he really is a nice man, isn't he?" Yeah, it is true. It is true. From the first handshake, you know this is truly the ultimate nice man. And we've all been very lucky to pass through your lives. So all I can say is, Gordon Schaber, long may you wave.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
People from near and far have been touched by Gordon's presence in their lives. Among many of our distinguished guests here tonight is one man who would certainly fess up to that, a man whose career has in many ways paralleled Gordon's. He was one of the first big television stars of the 1950s, when you knew him as Perry Mason. And Perry Mason still waves, I might add, at 11 o'clock, his latest show on Channel 3 on Sunday night.
How do you do? How are you, Frank?
Cheap, Stanley, cheap.
Thank you. Thank you.
Another generation knew him, of course, as Chief Ironsides. And just like Gordon Schaber, he still is the star of his field. the high ratings on his new Perry Mason television movies, seen on Channel 3, and his enduring popularity of the original Perry Mason episodes prove that conclusively. It is a pleasure to introduce someone who probably inspired more than one person in this room to go into the field of law, a longtime friend of Gordon's and a most generous benefactor of McGeorge's. Ladies and gentlemen, Raymond Burr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan, and thanks all of you. Now, I've had a wealth of experiences to be treasured in my lifetime, my long lifetime. But I can tell you in all honesty that I've been accorded no finer honor than to be asked to join with you tonight in honoring the judge. I'll tell you why. My work over the years has made me a very, very lucky man. I met many of the most illustrious people in the world, people of our age. But I've never met a man or woman in my life, public or private, whom I admire more than Gordon Schaber. I must also tell you that I never met a man or woman who could so deftly charm you out of every dollar in your pocket. I'm sure there are many of you in the audience who know Gordon not only as a friend, but as a great tax deduction. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the story of how I first met Gordon. With characteristic shrewdness, he has stolen the story and made it a part of his own remarks tonight. It's sort of who gets there first. I just don't understand why it's always him. But I can tell you that before I ever met him, I'd been fortunate to work with more than one president of the United States. And that's how I heard about Gordon Schaber, from President Truman, from President Eisenhower, from President Kennedy. Each of them spoke to me about and of Gordon Schaber. Despite their warnings, I met Gordon. And my life has never been the same since. That is due in part to Gordon's fame around the world. Now, we all know him as one of the finest legal minds in America. But I can testify to the fact that he is so known and appreciated in some of the most remote places on earth. I know because he made me go there. I received a call one day from Edwin Reischauer, ambassador to Japan. Indeed, Edwin Reischauer was one of our greatest ambassadors. The Supreme Court of Japan, I was told, wanted me to address them on world peace through the rule of law and legal education, all on Law Day, USA. Well, I was speechless. I mean that literally. I'm not sure I can write that speech, I said. And why would the Japanese Supreme Court ask for me anyway? Gordon suggested you, Reischauer said. Gordon Schaber. If you can't write the speech, Gordon will do it for you. I was asked to speak to the law school at the University of Melbourne. Naturally, I sought Gordon's help. You've got to be careful, Gordon said. This is a particularly tough school, and you're suspect because you're not a lawyer. You're just an actor. Those kids are going to bait you. They're going to have you on toast with cream sauce. I said, well, maybe I should cancel. No, no, said the judge. Go. Go. You'll have a great time. So, despite my better judgment, I went. The speech and questioning period that were scheduled to last 50 minutes went on for an excruciating 4 hours, halted only by the dean of the McGeorge School of Law. Thank you, Gordon, for the memory of those 4 grueling hours. Incidentally, the head of the student body felt so apologetic afterward that he presented me with a school tie, for which I also thank you, Gordon. 20 years later, this is true, I boarded an international flight. I was behind a tall man of obvious importance, attended to by an entourage of aides. It was the same fellow who had presented me with that necktie. His name was Andrew Peacock, and he was then Foreign Minister of Australia and probably will be their next Prime Minister. He turned to me and he said, "And how is Judge Schaber?" "We've been trying to get him to Australia for a speech." I said, "I'll do everything I can." I don't have time to tell you tonight of a wonderful trip I took with Gordon to Lubbock, Texas to open a law school there. Suffice to say, it includes meeting the famous George Jessel in Albuquerque. He'd been in Korea entertaining the troops, and he was dressed in a full army uniform with his toupee halfway on and wearing 20 million at least medals all over. He was returning from Korea in a military transport, and no one told him to get off in Los Angeles. That was George Jessel. The story also involves the two of us, Gordon and me, who are not exactly gymnasts, climbing into a 4-seater plane and flying all night to the Midland, Odessa airport, which was, of course, closed. While sitting in a dark lobby without coffee, snacks, or even a bubble gum machine, a couple approached, got closer to us, and they began calling out for an autograph. Now, Perry Mason was the #1 television show in America at that time, and I sat up very straight, but they did not want my autograph. Their son had gone to McGeorge. They wanted Gordon's autograph. And of course, he gave it to them. Twice. I'm delighted to be with you all. We have many distinguished guests in the audience tonight. I would like you to recognize 2 very special people in Gordon's life: his mother, Esther Schaber, and the Della Street of his life, his secretary of 40 years, Shirley Nill. You both are looking too young. Before we proceed with the main portion of our program, it's my distinct pleasure to present a tribute to Gordon Schaber from a man who needs no introduction.
Could we have a report up here? well-being of the video. Please.
It gives me great pleasure to extend my greetings to all of you gathered this evening to honor a truly great Californian and a fine American. Gordon Schaber's contributions to the state of California and the field of legal education are well known to all of you and have drawn national attention to the McGeorge School of Law. When I came to Sacramento as governor in 1967, it quickly became apparent to me that he was one of the community's greatest assets. I was only too happy to assist him in obtaining funds for the Courtroom of the Future's construction, and we were able to obtain a grant from the National Institute of Justice thanks to Gordon Schaber's vision. That proved to be taxpayer money well spent. When I had the honor of serving this country as president, we were able to work together on another project. Innovation has always been a hallmark of Gordon Schaber, and he recognized the need for more attention to victims' rights in our criminal justice system. He saw that our system seemed devoid of sympathy and compassion for the victim who first endured the crime, then had to relive its horrors in the courtroom. Dean Schaber started a program at McGeorge to help people caught in the daily trauma of our courtrooms. He sought to protect the victims as well as the defendants, and he was one of my special guests at a Rose Garden ceremony we held back in 1983 honoring victims of crime. As I was watching the election results a few weeks back, I swore I'd never say another nice thing about a Democrat, but I have to make an exception in the case of Gordon Schaber. Nancy and I wanted to extend our congratulations on your accomplishments as Dean of the McGeorge School of Law. We would also like to wish you much happiness on your birthday. Enjoy this very special evening in your honor and remember us to the people of Sacramento. Thank you, and God bless you.
Gordon Schaber is a man of countless interests and talents. He has applied his towering intellect and unbridled enthusiasm to three arenas in particular: government, the law, and community service. A common thread runs through his professional life: friendship and loyalty. He has had a great impact on many longtime associates and has advised more than many high-ranking officials. We've invited some of them to speak directly to that impact. Among them, former Governor Edmund G. Pat Brown and former United States Attorney General Ed Meese.
You know, when you're governor of a great big state like California, you meet many people. Some you remember, some you don't. But Gordon Schaber is one of the outstanding human beings that I came in contact with during my period as governor. He was objective, he was thorough, he was kind, and he knew human beings. And I can't say too much about his greatness. I had great confidence in him, and he never made a bad recommendation. He was one of my advisors, and when I think about it, I don't think there's any one individual that did as much for me as Gordon Schaber. But I always enjoyed talking with him because he was so objective and so gentle in his criticism of people that I like to talk with him.
Gordon, it was a real pleasure to have had the privilege of knowing you and working with you over nearly a quarter of a century. It started out when I was in the governor's office, and I would come to you for good ideas and good counsel, and also your assistance as we developed some new ideas in legal training for administrative law judges and others who helped our administration in Sacramento. And then later on, when I went into legal education itself, your counsel and advice was again very much welcomed. And finally, during my time in the White House and later as Attorney General, you were always ready with good ideas and good suggestions, including some very sound advice on the selection of judges, including justices of the Supreme Court.
Some of you may not be aware of the far-reaching effect Dean Schaber has had on legal education. 3 of Gordon's esteemed colleagues can attest to his noteworthy contributions in the field of law. They are Bill L. Atchley, the president of McGeorge's parent school, the University of the Pacific, Susan Westerberg Prager, dean of the University of California, Los Angeles Law School, and James P. White, consultant on legal education, American Bar Association. We will also hear from B.E. Witkin, the guru of California legal codes, who reminds us that Gordon's fundraising skills are legendary throughout the Wild West.
McGeorge School of Law and Gordon Shaber are synonymous. In 1957, when Gordon took over the old brick building on 5th Avenue and 33rd Street for the McGeorge College of Law, no one but Gordon visualized the eventual 21-acre campus where McGeorge is home today. No one but Gordon could have directed the development of McGeorge to the academic prominence it enjoys today. No one but Gordon is held in such high esteem by the loyal McGeorge alumni. And no one but Gordon has that Midas touch when it comes to raising funds for his beloved McGeorge. I and the University of Pacific are most fortunate to continue to have Gordon's guidance as the university counselor. Thanks, Gordon, and God bless you.
So many of us in legal education inherited well-formed, very fine institutions. What's remarkable to me about what you have been able to accomplish is through your audacity and your determination, your warmth and your vision, you created a whole new kind of legal education, beginning with a night program and expanding into a full-fledged, very fine law school. You looked at everything differently. You became one of the pioneers in this very important movement for clinical education. You experimented in part because you were audacious and spunky, and in part perhaps because you didn't have anything to lose. It turns out that not only did you and McGeorge and Sacramento gain, but we all gained tremendously in legal education. You built facilities that were totally different than those available at the time, and those clinical and other facilities at McGeorge have stood the test of time.
Because much of what the section has accomplished in the past 15 years has been due to the work of Gordon Schaber. Our standards as we have them, our criteria, rules, all have been developed under his leadership. The profession is more diverse. The law schools themselves have greater strength, greater resources, more women, more minorities. Gordon Schaber has been in the forefront of all of these activities, and indeed his activities have benefited American legal education and have benefited the legal profession. We are a better profession today because of Gordon Schaber, and he is certainly one of the towering figures of American legal education in the latter part of this century.
I had a dream full of hope for the survival of the rule of law. In that dream, I heard the sound of hoofbeats as a man arrives on a small horse in a cloud of dust, gold dust, that is. Less towering than El Cid, less gaunt than Don Quixote, not as broad as Matt Dillon, not as slim as Shane, not as dashing as Paladin, but nonetheless firm in the saddle, his right hand outstretched, palm upward, in the universal gesture of the peaceful collector of fiscal blessings for good causes, the not-so-lone ranger, Buck Schaber. Buck, don't get off the horse. Your talents in this field are needed, now more than ever.
Once Gordon turned to me and said, "Raymond, do you mind if we name a reading room for you?" I was, of course, deeply flattered, and I said, "I would be delighted." He said, "Good." Then he said, "I noticed the last time I visited your home that you have a tremendous library. Now, Raymond, you can't honestly tell me that you can read all of those books. So I said, I'll see that the school gets a good portion of them." And he said, "Good." Then he said, "The walls will be very bare." And I said, "We'll find some paintings." The next day, I relayed all of this to my partner, Robert Benavides, who thought a reading room was a wonderful notion. And I said, "Robert, he got the books. Robert, he got the paintings. Robert, he won't stop there." And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, Gordon called to say that the books and the paintings were terrific, but there were some empty places in the room. "Okay, Gordon," I said, "if you have empty spaces, we will try to fill them." And we did. And he didn't stop there either. And let me tell you, in addition to his devotion to McGeorge and legal education, Gordon also has left his mark on the community of Sacramento. He has served on countless committees, commissions, and charity boards, and in all instances offered intelligence, compassion, and a level head. Gordon is the consummate advocate for individuals he admires and causes he adopts.
You know, if you've got Gordon Schaber on your side, you can literally leap tall buildings with a single bound. In fact, you might even leap all the way into the Supreme Court building. That's what happened, as we all know, to Tony Kennedy a few years back. Tony probably thinks that he got onto the court through his merit. But we all know here in Sacramento that it was really Gordon Schaber that put Tony Kennedy on the U.S. Supreme Court. As a matter of fact, for a while there, during all that intense lobbying, during the nomination consideration, we got a little confused down at the B about who really was the nominee. And was it Tony or was it Gordon? I doubt that there are many, if any, lasting benefits in this community that somehow don't have the fingerprints of Gordon Schaber on them. He is a man of enormous intellect, which he combines with a deep compassion for people, which is a rare combination, as we all know. And Gordon uses it so well to enrich the lives of the people around him. He does that at all levels. There are people who can testify to that in this room, I am sure. There are big people, there are little people. Anybody who needs help, Gordon Schaber is there.
Gordy, haven't we had fun over the years? Remember back when McGeorge was just a little funky school and you said this is going to be the best law school in the whole country, and we're going to have a fundraiser that's going to be the most imaginative fundraiser ever, and Raleigh Botts, that crazy, beautiful friend of ours, said, I can get Lorne Green, I can do this, I can do that. And he did. That's the first time he ever really produced. And Lorne Green came and we had the biggest fundraiser ever, and we had a cocktail party in Skid Row down at the Saddle Rock, and everybody had gin and Byerly's orange drink. And Bill Conlon and Jim Fuller and you and me and all the crazies got together and we did a parade, the St. Pat's Parade. We were all involved in that. And in the meantime, you were building a law school. You were that other Gordon that we were too dumb to appreciate, that scholar, that intellect that built this fine, fine school. And you are here with us, and you're having a birthday, and people call you power broker, genius, intellect, and I call you my dearest, best, loving friend. Happy birthday, dear Gordy.
I've known Gordon Schaber when he was still a lawyer and I was a waiter at George Johnson's Del Prado back in the 50s. The way we met was he would come to the restaurant to eat late. All the other waiters would want to go home. I would take the late parties, and I learned how to make his favorite dinner, which was a Caesar salad with extra Parmesan. He found out I was a struggling student at that time, and he would leave a very big tip every time. Since then, he was my very dear friend. Seriously, he took an interest in a young student, a waiter, and all through the years gave me very fine advice. He has provided Sacramento, California, the whole nation with his time and with his ideas, with his efforts to make our community better. Very unselfish human being. I want to wish Gordon Schaber the greatest, beautiful, beautiful life, because he deserves it, because he has given to us so much. And Gordon, I love you very, very much.
Gordon Shafer has had and has a thorough and thoroughly positive effect on my life. I was brought up to be ethical and honest, but it is one thing to learn such values, another to follow them all of your life. Just when I was at an age and a point in my career when such things can become less important, I met Gordon Schaber. And those values became more important than ever to me. We've heard the word character bandied about too much recently, but I know someone to whom it really applies, for whom integrity, loyalty, and friendship are a way of life, for whom the law is never a business, but a sacred profession. I've been in film and theater for more than 50 years. I consider myself something of an expert on heroes. Gordon Schaber is a true hero. Erwin Potts said that he combines enormous intellect with compassion, that wherever someone needs help, whether they are the mighty or the impoverished, Gordon Schaber will be there. Thank you, Your Honor, for providing so many of us with a living symbol of the wisdom and reasoning powers of the law, of the hope inherent in the legal system, of the ultimate victory of good over evil. Because of you, we know that life can be better and that justice can prevail when pursued by dedicated minds and hearts such as yours. Now, the program belongs to our friend Stan Atkinson, but I have to tell you just one more story. Several years ago, Gordon Schaber asked me to meet him in Washington, D.C. I was going anyway to speak at the National Flower Show at the Washington Armory. I agreed to participate as well with Gordon in Law and Layman panel, Justice Clark's Law and Layman panel. I asked Gordon, I said, yes, I'll go. I asked him to fly with me. With a wave of his hand, he said simply, I'll see you tomorrow. I will see you tomorrow. I said, fine, sir, fine. As it happened, I had been hurt on a picture and had to be wheeled to a plane in a wheelchair. We took off and almost reached the East Coast when the plane turned back because of a severe storm that was ahead of us. We turned back and landed in St. Louis. I raced across the airport trying to make the connecting flight to Washington. In the chaos, I passed another man in a wheelchair zooming in the opposite direction. It was Gordon. He said, I told you I'd see you today. He whizzed past and then he disappeared. I got on the flight to Washington, found the Capitol buried in a snowstorm, but really buried, but I made it to my hotel. The next morning, the city was paralyzed. No taxis, no limos, no nothing. I had an hour to get to my speech, so I rented a horse-drawn sleigh. Set out, wheelchair and all, like going across country to the Armory. I arrived there in fine shape and greeted at the door by a watchman who said, it's nice you're here, Mr. Burr, but the show has been canceled until tomorrow. And I said, I thought that, but could I at least look at the flowers? He wheeled me into the huge armory. It's as still as a cathedral inside, absolutely empty, except for a man sitting quietly all by himself in a wheelchair. Gordon Schaber. To this day, I have never asked Gordon how he got there, what plane he took, how he crossed the city. I have never asked, and I won't tonight. I just want to say, Gordon, you are indeed a truly remarkable man. Stan?
Wonderful.
Thank you for that, Ray. Gordon, the original agenda called for me to lead everybody in the singing of Happy Birthday, but mercifully for you and everyone else, duty calls. There's a little problem where the news comes first. If I don't get back there, it'll be where the news comes last. So I'm going to have to beg off. But before doing so, let me simply say that for all of us, this community certainly, and most definitely the college, but for all of us who would be wandering around aimlessly in this life, were it not for you, please do never get off that horse. Another longtime friend is here to pay tribute to his longtime friend and colleague. Anthony M. Kennedy was an adjunct professor of law at McGeorge for 23 years. He and Mary have come west tonight for this special moment. In fact, the Justice continues to teach constitutional law in the McGeorge program each summer in Salzburg. A native Sacramentan, Tony Kennedy was appointed in 1975 by President Ford to the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, and at that time, he was the youngest man ever to be appointed to the nation's second highest court. He served with distinction, and during that time, he demonstrated a remarkable capacity to both interpret and fashion the law of the land. Then, on February 18th of 1988, a proud day for everybody in Sacramento, as Tony Kennedy was sworn in as the 104th Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. Please welcome back to his hometown, Justice Tony Kennedy.
Thank you. Only the litigators need to stay standing. To Gordon Schaber, on this splendid evening of your birthday, to Stan Atkinson and Mr. Raymond Burr, to President Ashley, Mrs. Ashley, and to Dean Kaplan and Mrs. Kaplan, thank you very much for this warm welcome. And to fellow admirers of the works and deeds that are monuments to Gordon Schaber, thank you very much for the welcome that you've given to marrying me tonight. I was reading a transcript not long ago in a criminal case from the state of New York, and apparently the criminal defendant in an arraignment proceeding, which is the time when the judge first advises the criminal defendant of his rights, had on some sort of a crazy outfit. And all he kept saying was, "The Lord is my attorney. The Lord is my attorney." And the judge advised him of his rights. He said, "Well, now you have a right to a jury trial." He said, "The Lord is my attorney." He said, "And you have a right to compel the appearance of witnesses." He said, "The Lord is my attorney." And finally the judge said, "And now I'm going to appoint you a lawyer." And the man said, "The Lord is my attorney." And the judge said, "Oh, I realize that, but I'm going to allow you to associate local counsel." It's a pleasure tonight, Gordon, for us to be surrounded by so many local counsel, because it reminds me of the early days in the Sacramento bar, early days for me and for the dean. I came to Sacramento in the early 1960s, and the bar welcomed me as it had Gordon just 10 years before. The bar then was a very close, tight-knit group, and news traveled very fast. We always enjoyed stories. Gordon particularly, and I enjoyed the story of the devastating answer given by a witness when she was being cross-examined by a quite important attorney, important by his own estimation. This attorney had long since passed that bare threshold of self-assurance that's needed for professional confidence. He was firmly in the brace of a titanic ego. And in those days, the trial judges would let you get away with almost anything on impeaching a witness, and he was cross-examining the young woman who was the plaintiff in the proceeding. And suddenly, before the jury, he said, "And isn't it true, young lady, that you conceived a child outside of wedlock?" And she said, "No, I think it was just outside of Turlock." I had my own initiation to the bar when I took over the proceedings in an estate where there were a number of contested issues, a number of attorneys in town, and the probate judge was Judge J. Henry, a fine judge with a degree from Yale. And he'd ruled against my position on allocation of income and expenses to various groups of litigants. And then in one of those merciful developments that come from time to time, a week or so later, there was an opinion from the District Court of Appeals in a case that I thought was controlling, and I convinced the attorneys on the other side that that was the case. And it was agreed that I could go see Judge Henry and suggest that his order be amended. And so I went from the Forum building where my office was, and it was a building that was many attorneys were in, including Gordon. The 926J building, I think was then called the California Western States Life building, was the other building where many attorneys were. And I went over to the courthouse between the 9 o'clock and the 10 o'clock calendar to get Judge Henry to change this order if he would. And I went into his chambers. He was all by himself and sitting at his desk. And I said, Judge Henry, I'm here on the Smith estate. My name is Anthony Kennedy. There was a pause, and he looked up. And he said, what do you expect me to do, stand up and salute? And thinking that some response on my part was required, I said the only thing that would remotely suggest that that's appropriate, Your Honor, is your Yale degree. And then I wondered if I'd gone too far as a young attorney, but apparently he was much amused by it. So much amused that it took me about maybe 15 minutes to get from the old courthouse to the forum building. And when I entered the lobby, which was crowded about 10 in the morning, there was Gordon and Gil Rowland and 3 or 4 other attorneys, and they shouted as I entered the hall, "Stand and salute." And for a week or 10 days later, everybody was saluting me. I tell that story not to suggest reinstitution of that practice, which might be congenial to my present position. But to indicate how tight-knit and wonderful and splendid the bar was in those days. Those were wonderful halcyon days in the practice of law in Sacramento. It was a profession that was tight-knit, small. We like to think elite, composed of people devoted to the law, skilled in their profession, respectful of each other, with an ethic that was self-policing and not, in all respects, self-serving. And that was the bar that Gordon and I knew when we first started to practice. But Gordon knew that the era of some 75, perhaps 100 years that had given shape to this bar was about to close. He knew that the legal profession, with many other constituent elements of society, was on the brink of tremendous social and economic and cultural change. And he knew in the 1960s that the profession had to change. Gordon Schaber knew the number of black attorneys who were licensed to practice in the state of Alabama. There were 4. He knew that of the 50,000 students in law schools nationwide, only 500 or so were black, and that not all of them would graduate. He knew that in a profession which prided itself on elaborating rules for the ordering of the most intimate relations in society, as well as its major corporate and financial structure, that only 4 to 5% of the law school student bodies throughout the United States were composed of women. He knew that a great profession, a noble profession, a learned profession, must accept change. The law profession had 2 choices. It could refuse to accept change and become irrelevant, simply be swept aside, or it could meet the demands of a new society, consistent with its great traditions and its most fundamental principles. And that's why the bar lost one of its finest members, finest practicing attorneys, when Gordon went on the bench. And in just a few short years, he distinguished himself, had really a meteoric rise, and it was clear he would have an eminent and distinguished judicial career. But Gordon saw that a profession couldn't change unless the young people who would soon be the sole trustees of our profession were trained and taught and challenged in how to meet the demands that were being placed on a new profession. And so he went to a little law school, and he had big ideas. Then a whirlwind took place at McGeorge. Whether one talks about alternative dispute resolution, client counseling, negotiating skills, new systems for delivering legal services, or the ethical and the professional consequences of those new developments, McGeorge was not only an innovator, it was the solid leader in its field. Dean Shaber's tenure made McGeorge one of the leading chapters in the story of modern legal education, culminating in Gordon's receipt just a few years ago of the rare distinction of being given by the American Bar Association the QTAC Award, which is the American Bar Association's highest award for outstanding and distinguished contribution to American legal education. To give you an example of the way Gordon works and thinks, in about 1972, Governor Reagan adopted a welfare reform statute, a series of statutes. But no one noticed that this new statute, plus a combination of Supreme Court decisions, meant that suddenly 30,000 people in the state of California had to have a hearing before an administrative law judge. And the administration, the Governor Reagan's administration, was simply stunned. So Gordon Shafer walked into the governor's office and talked to his people. And he said, "How would you like me to give you 60 administrative law judges in 60 days?" Now, if it had been any person other than Gordon Shafer, they would have thought that this was a man subject to some bizarre fantasy. But they didn't, and they listened. And after they listened, Gordon went out to his students and said, "How many people don't have a job this summer?" A lot of people raised their hands. He said, "How'd you like to become judges for the summer?" The net result was that with a crash training program, Gordon fell a little short of 60. He got 53 students from McGeorge, and the other 7 he got from Davis. And put them in the field for 60 days, training these young people in how to meet a problem immediately, consistently with the law's requirement, and they rendered distinguished service. One of the things were on such short notice that these young people had to fly all over the state of California, and they did it on the dean's personal credit card. And I went into his office one day, and they had these frequent flyer coupons just all over the office. But this is an example of the courage and the vision and the dynamism and the innovative capacity of the man. Now, when Gordon became full-time dean, there was something of a loss, just as the profession had lost a practitioner and the bench had lost a jurist. McGeorge faculty lost a magnificent classroom teacher. Gordon was a superb classroom teacher. His special study, his special love in the law, was contracts. And this tells quite a bit about the man. Gordon knew and understood that contracts really lie at the center of the American private legal system and of the American industrial system. Remember But it wasn't the engineers and the scientists and the industrial designers that were the driving force of the American Revolution, of the American Industrial Revolution. It was also and primarily the lawyers who aggregated the wealth through a system of complex legal structures that was necessary to drive and to fuel this system. And it's one of the great tributes to the American legal profession. And those lawyers who do not go into court, who do not read Supreme Court decisions, and who work as judges and mediators in their own way in keeping this complicated but highly efficient system of ours going, are preeminent people in our profession, and Gordon knew and understood this. But he understood something more. He understood that a good contract is one in which the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, because with a good contract, each person enhances his or her position. Society as a whole is enriched. Society is the third-party beneficiary of every good contract. Gordon knew more than how to draw contracts. He knew how to keep them. Gordon was, as dean of a great law school, the party to many contracts. And any time Gordon Schaber was a party to a contract, it was quite clear that there was an implied covenant of good faith and fair dealing. Gordon always gave more than he bargained for. This was a hallmark of the man. But even more, I think Gordon's love and knowledge and fascination with contracts stood in a greater symbolic and a greater real sense for Gordon's own philosophy. And that was that each of us have a compact with our fellow citizens, and for Gordon, he has a covenant with all of humanity. And that is why I always think of Gordon as the preeminent example of someone who knows and understands the sanctity of contract. One of Gordon's most favorite cities is London, England. And in London, there is a plaque not far from Gray's Inn where many McGeorge courses are taught. McGeorge has a very substantial and important presence in the English legal profession because of Dean Gordon Schaber's work. Christopher Wren was the great architect of many magnificent buildings still standing in London. And he wrote his own inscription for this plaque. And the plaque says, "If you seek my monuments, look around you." Gordon, if you seek your monuments, look around you tonight. You understand the tangible and the intangible characteristics, the tangible and intangible qualities that make for greatness in a law school, and in a community, and in a great dynamic and free society. Now, Gordon's going to get up here and tell you that really the credit is all due to Sacramento and the tribute is its and so forth. In a certain sense, of course, he's right. Sacramento knew and understood the greatness that existed at McGeorge in the growth cycle of our own city. It recognized the need for an intellectual resource where members of the profession could discuss the great ideas of the law, to try to teach the law in the grand manner, and to try and teach these students who would be the trustees of the profession the meaning of the fundamentals of law and morality and justice. So to be sure, Sacramento deserves a great amount of tribute. But in a very real sense, in an impersonal society, it is a rare thing to see an institution which bears the hallmark of one man and of his genius and of his commitment. And that is what you've built here, Gordon. In thinking about the great things that Gordon has done, as I was coming out here these last few days, I thought of the poem about Ulysses. And it's a poem about Ulysses in his later years, after all of his great heroic deeds, like rescuing damsels and so forth, have been concluded. And he's handed most of the hero business off to his young understudy, Telemachus. And he's kind of kicking around his apple orchard. But there's a restive spirit there. You know he's not quite through. And the words that Ulysses speaks, I think, are the words that Gordon speaks tonight. The poem says this: made weak by time and fate, we are yet strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Some work of noble note may still be done by men who strove with gods. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Gordon, happy birthday. Please remain standing while I introduce Dean Gerald Kaplan and the great Dean Gordon Schaber.
Thank you very much. Just wonderful, Tony.
The steering committee has permitted me to add a word about Gordon Schaber. My wife Deborah and I met Gordon last March when we first visited McGeorge. Gordon invited us to lunch on our first day here. We were charmed. We remained charmed. I asked him some questions on that day, and there is ample testimony that I've been asking questions ever since. Gordon is officially identified in the University of Pacific catalog as University Counselor and Distinguished Professor. But to those of us at McGeorge, to you here tonight, and to me, he remains the Dean. When I hear someone say the Dean is here, I don't look around. I know Gordon's in the room. I have been asked whether it is difficult to follow Gordon Schaber. And the answer is no. Nobody compares me to Gordon. Gordon is one of a kind. His performance as dean cannot be imitated, only admired. I thank the committee. It is my pleasure now to invite Congressman Bob Matsui to the podium to read us a special message.
Thank you very much, Dean Kaplan. To Justice Kennedy, Dean Gordon Schaber, Dean Kaplan, and to the friends of Gordon Schaber tonight. I have to tell you that many words were given to you tonight, Dean Schaber. You were called an outstanding jurist. You're called a great legal scholar. But I think we in Sacramento, we in this state, we in this nation, when historians look back years from now to 1992, they will say that if there is, in the 20th century, in America, a Renaissance man, it is indeed you, Dean Schaber. I'd like to read a letter dated November 20th, 1992. It's addressed to Gordon Schaber. Dear Dean Schaber, I join with your friends gathered tonight in Sacramento in recognizing you for your notable accomplishments and also to wish you a very happy 65th birthday. Your dedication during the past 34 years in making McGeorge School of Law one of our nation's finest institutions of legal learning has earned you respect and admiration from your community and the nation. Your devotion to excellence and concern for your students, coupled with your unique sense of humor, bestows honor upon the University of Pacific and the legal profession. Your being named Distinguished Professor of Law at McGeorge School of Law and Counselor of the University of Pacific is fitting extension of your guiding influence in the community. I congratulate you on all of your accomplishments and wish you the very best in your new responsibilities in the future. Sincerely, President-elect Bill Clinton. Thank you, Dean Schaber.
It is my pleasure to invite Jim Anwell and Gene Runyon to join me on stage to make special presentations to the Dean. Jim Anwell is the president of the McGeorge Alumni Association Board of Directors. He has put in a terrific year full of accomplishments. Gene Runyon, you've already been introduced to as a member of the Shaver Salute Committee, which made all this happen tonight.
On behalf of the McGeorge Alumni Association, whose membership Gordon Schaber is largely responsible for, I would like to present a small token of our appreciation. Gordon, we know you are one of Sacramento's leading wine connoisseurs. For your 65th birthday, you deserve a gift that has aged with the same elegance you have. 1927 was a vintage year for port wine from the Graham Vineyards. This 1927 bottle of Graham port has traveled from Malvados, Portugal, for this special occasion tonight. Please accept it with our sincere appreciation.
Thank you very much.
This is a remarkable evening with remarkable people, and it's thrilling for Gordon. And it was a privilege for all of us who served on the organization committee. And on behalf of our committee, I want to tell you that we commissioned a wonderfully bright young woman, Diane Walters, Dan Walters' wife, who's quite an artist, quite a sculptor, and she's done Gordy. and I'm going to unveil it. And it symbolizes many things. I say something dirty?
Yeah.
Never fail. Anyway, she has many symbolic things on the statue that to us epitomize Gordy, and friends sat around and talked about him and showed pictures, and so it's my privilege to carefully unveil the statue by Diane Walters.
Oh my. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jen.
Permit me what may seem a digression, and a boring one at that. I want to tell you a bit about our law library. The law library is the heart of any law school. McGeorge is blessed with a fine law library. Somebody on this stage had something to do with making it the second largest private collection of any law school in California. Last year, it underwent a $1.6 million expansion and remodeling. Today, it houses instruction rooms for both Lexis and Westlaw, online systems, and has many modern features. It is open 360 days a year, not only to students and alumni, but to area attorneys throughout Northern California. Like Gordon Schaber, the law library is a community resource. It is perhaps the most significant manifestation of Gordon's many achievements. In recognition of the foregoing, I have the honor of announcing that by action of the Board of Regents of the University of Pacific, effective this day, the library is to be known as the Gordon D. Schaber Law Library. I hope you've all been able to see that. If not, please step forward later and enjoy the description. Now, at last, I turn the podium over to the man we have come to honor, Gordon Schaber.
Pull the chair back. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. Chair, Dean Kaplan, Jim Anwell, and Jean Runyon. I want to thank you very much for those kind, generous gifts. And this naming of the library is news to me. And if Stan Atkinson were still here, I'd have to tell you that I looked at him for a long time. And then I became concerned about his teeth. So I got him a new sponsor to replace Hostess Twinkies. Well, when I was a young man, my mother and father warned me about getting mixed up with the wrong crowd. Well, I reflected on that, but I decided to show up tonight anyway. Hi, Mom. If it weren't for you, there'd be no tonight. And if it weren't for Louise Mason, my aide de camp, I might not be here either. The theme of this dinner is what a difference one man can make. Well, no one man can make a difference without the help of a great many good and wonderful people. I have been more than blessed with people who have helped me through all these years. I'd especially like to thank all of you who came this evening, and the organizers, and those who recorded the messages that we saw tonight. They have all assisted me in numerous ways in making the difference. Let me tell you how. First, there was a period of 12 years in private practice of the law. Then Pat Brown appointed me to the Superior Court of Sacramento County. During all of this time, I was already serving as dean. I sat there in the court trying cases with many McGeorge graduates in them. I became very concerned about their trial skills. But after all, it was at a time when young people were seriously questioning whether the justice system worked, and above all, whether it worked for the individual litigant. That propelled me to seek funds to build the courtroom of the future with its modern videotape facilities and jury in the round. With the help of then Governor Ronald Reagan and his executive secretary Ed Meese, we received assistance in the construction from the National Institute for Justice. We have educated many members of all of their administrations at McGeorge. In fact, we educated almost all who learned that governors have one good thing to give away: a judgeship. For a long time, McGeorge was host to the Legal Aid Society, and in fact, their first office in Sacramento was on our campus. This pro bono notion led us to develop the existing clinical building. With the help of the Errata Foundation, we built the building where the Community Legal Services Clinic resides now, and which so effectively has taught so many skills and served so many of the indigent population in Sacramento. Our library is the second largest privately held law library in the state of California, with its 375,000 volumes. And in light of the pressures on public law libraries, our library has been a host to the bench and bar of Sacramento, as well as providing a magnificent resource for our students, faculty, and graduates. We're extremely proud of the service-oriented library that we operate. Another thing we're proud about is our students' success in passing the California bar. When I graduated from Hastings, B.E. Whitkin and his bar review course were the only game in town. His lectures and notes provided me the basis for my instruction in the bar, and soon McGeorge had premier bar results. He has talked frequently on the McGeorge campus. The last time was at our last commencement. I'm forever indebted for his friendship and support. And you know, I always feel we're about to see a new edition of the Bible with royalties to God, the name I use for B.E. Whitkin. Then there was a long period of state and national accreditation. The consultant on legal education and admissions to the bar of the American Bar Association, Dean James P. Weiss, is here tonight, as well as Susan Prager, the Dean of the UCLA Law School, who is also the past president of the Association of American Law Schools. To each of them, I owe a special thanks for what they've done for me and for McGeorge. Many thanks also go to President Ashley and the regents of the University of the Pacific, especially Eugene McGeorge, who represented us on that board for many years. It was with their blessings, support, and credit which allowed us to build the present McGeorge campus. And I must give a special thanks to the service of John Ryan for operating McGeorge during my illness with efficiency and dispatch. Needless to say, the contributions of Dr. Angelo and Sophia Tsakopoulos, Melon Enlo Osi, Fred and Pat Anderson, and many others who are here tonight didn't hurt one bit, not at all. Then there has been the meaningful assistance through the years by the McClatchy newspapers. I owe a special debt of gratitude to that organization and a special thanks to Irwin Potts, its president and chief executive officer, for the message that you saw on videotape tonight. And special thanks is owed to my longtime and good friend, Gene Runyon, who also recorded a message for tonight. I always say that she's the nearest thing I ever saw to Auntie Mabe. Then there was the period of my illness and the last 2 years of continued recovery. I'm particularly indebted to my family and my many other wonderful friends in this audience. But I won't thank you publicly for fear I might miss someone. I also owe a special thanks to my longtime friend, Raymond Burr. He's been a dear friend and a good supporter of McGeorge. And there's a story behind his association. The author of the Perry Mason book series, Earl Stanley Gardner, had an honorary degree from McGeorge, and he agreed one year to be the commencement speaker. A few days before the commencement, his brother, who was a surgeon, called me to tell me that he had just taken out Earl's appendix. I expressed great regret and asked him, who the hell is going to be the substitute commencement speaker? And he said, I'll ask Earl. And when he called me back, he said, we have a tremendous idea. Raymond Burr has been acting as Perry Mason, and already that show is a nationwide success. He's made speeches before bar associations, but really nobody knows that he's not a lawyer. He could do it. So I said, well, who'll prepare the damn commencement address? And he said, you can do it. So Raymond came to the commencement, which was held outdoors near a railroad track. All during his part of the address, there was a train that came along and noisily backed up and switched cars. And finally, as Raymond was near the end of his remarks, the train pulled out. To this day, Raymond Burr claims he gave the best commencement address in the whole United States, and no one can prove otherwise. That started a long association, which I'm pleased to say has lasted through tonight. Justice Anthony Kennedy does us all great honor by coming here tonight. Just as he honored us as a member of the McGeorge faculty for 23 years before he was elevated to the Supreme Court of the United States. He continues to be involved in our overseas summer session in Salzburg. We're delighted that Justice Kennedy and his wife Mary are here, and I'd like you please to rise so we can give you another round of applause. Miller Darude, professor of law at the University of Texas and the previous consultant on legal education and former executive director of the Association of American Law Schools, as well as secretary of the Order of the Coif, is also chair of our Board of Visitors. He headed the search at McGeorge for my successor, and he's seated somewhere out there with his lovely wife, Barbara. Won't you please rise? Let's see who he is. His search produced over 200 applicants, from which Gerald Kaplan was selected. Kaplan has a clear vision of the future of legal education, and he will apply that vision to McGeorge. Gerald Kaplan and his wife Deborah are here tonight. I'd like to have you rise again and extend an applause to you, won't you? Well, you may all think this is a retirement dinner, but it's not. I'm back. I intend to go on using all of you so we can continue to make a difference. During the next few years, you can find me at the same old stand, but this is my chance to say to you all, I hope you can find your way to continue your support of our Academic Enrichment Fund. To the many contributors to McGeorge, and especially the members of the Dean's Council who are here, I owe a deep debt of gratitude for your support. Help me during the years to come to continue to make a difference. Oh, thank you. This has been a splendid evening, and I want to thank you all for coming. And thank you very, very much, and good night.